In 1893, the city of Chicago didn't just host a World's Fair. It built a white city out of plaster and drains to hide a black city of soot and slaughter. While Nikola Tesla was preparing to illuminate the world with alternating current, a man named H. Holmes was finishing a hotel designed specifically for murder. This is the story of how America stepped into the light of the 20th century while dragging its darkest demons behind it. Chapter 1. The Current of Ambition. The year was 1892. New York City smelled of horse manure, ozone, and the expensive cigars of men who owned the future. Thomas Edison sat in his laboratory, his fingers stained with chemicals, staring at a light bulb that flickered like a dying heart. He was losing. The war of currents wasn't just about physics, it was about who would own the soul of the United States. Across town, a tall, gaunt man with eyes like focused lightning, Nikola Tesla, stepped out of a carriage. He didn't care for money, which made him dangerous. He cared for the frequency of the earth. He believed he could pull energy from the very air, a notion that made the bankers at J.P. Morgan break into cold sweats. "Mr. Tesla," a voice called out from the shadows of the laboratory entrance. It was Elias Thorne, a fictionalized yet representative figure of the era's investigative journalists, the muckrakers. Thorne had been tracking a series of disappearances linked to the construction of the upcoming Chicago World's Fair. "The light you're building, Nikola, it's going to cast very long shadows in the west," Thorne warned. Tesla didn't turn around. "Shadows are merely the absence of information, Mr. Thorne. Once I give them the light, the shadows will have nowhere to hide." He was wrong. Chapter 2. The White City and the Murder Castle. The scene shifts to Chicago, 1893. The world's Columbian Exposition was a marvel of architectural hubris. Massive white buildings mirrored the grandeur of Rome, lit by thousands of Tesla's AC bulbs. It was the first time the human eye had seen a city glow at night. But 3 miles away, in the Englewood neighborhood, stood a grim 3-story fortress known to locals as the Castle. Its owner, Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, was a man of exquisite taste and surgical precision. As millions flocked to see the Ferris wheel, a giant mechanical circle of steel designed to rival the Eiffel Tower, young women from across the Midwest were arriving at Holmes' doorstep. They were looking for jobs, for freedom, for the modern American dream. Holmes would greet them with a smile that never reached his eyes. He had built a labyrinth. Soundproof rooms, gas lines connected to bedrooms, a kiln in the basement that could reach temperatures hot enough to liquefy bone. Chapter 3. The intersection of progress and horror. The narrative follows the parallel lives of 3 people. Tesla, struggling to prove his wireless power theories while being sabotaged by corporate titans. Elias Thorne, the journalist, who begins to notice that the missing persons list at the fair is growing at an exponential rate. And Clara Vance, a fictionalized young woman working as a stenographer at the fair, who becomes the bridge between the high society galas of the inventors and the dark corridors of Englewood. The tension rises as the fair reaches its peak. This wasn't just a party, it was a transition of the human species. We see the introduction of Crackerjack, the moving walkway, and the first voice recordings. But under the music of the brass bands, Thorne discovers a horrific pattern. The bodies aren't just being disposed of, they are being sold. In an era where medical schools were booming, but subjects for dissection were scarce, Holmes had turned murder into a vertical supply chain. He was a capitalist of the macabre. Chapter 4. The Collapse of the Dream. As the 1893 panic hits the stock market, the glamour of the White City begins to fade. The contrast becomes unbearable. The rich are eating 10-course meals under electric chandeliers, while the panic brings thousands of starving workers to the fair's gates.
Thorne and Tesla's paths finally cross at the Temple of Electricity. Thorne reveals his evidence. The coal being used to power the fair's generators might be tainted with the remains of the missing. The shimmering light of the new world was being fueled, quite literally, by the victims of its own progress. The story culminates in a breathless chase through the World's Fair at night, a landscape of blinding white lights and pitch-black corners. Holmes is finally cornered, not by the police, but by the very technology he tried to hide behind. The newly invented telegraphy and forensic chemistry begin to weave a net that even a master manipulator cannot escape. The historical reality, a note for the audience. This story weaves real history with narrative flair. The White City was real. Tesla's triumph over Edison was real. And H. Holmes, America's first documented serial killer, truly did use the distraction of the World's Fair to claim his victims. It was a time when the human race moved faster than its own morality.
The electricity did more than light up the streets. It exposed the bones of a changing nation. As the 1893 World's Fair reached its sweltering midpoint, the White City became a fever dream of human achievement and hidden depravity. Chapter 5. The Glass Ceiling of the Gilded Age. While Tesla paced his laboratory, obsessed with the ether, Clara Vance found herself trapped in a different kind of grid. She was a new woman, educated, independent, and dangerously observant. Working as a stenographer for the fair's planning committee, she began to notice discrepancies in the guest logs of the Englewood Postal District. Names of vibrant young women from Ohio, Indiana, and New York appeared in the arrival ledgers, but never in the departure manifests. "Mr. Thorne," Clara whispered, meeting the journalist under the shadow of the massive Ferris wheel, "the city is eating them. I've tracked 14 names. They all checked into a place called the World's Fair Hotel. None of them checked out." Elias Thorne looked at the list. His hands, usually steady enough to sketch a crime scene, trembled. "That's H. Holmes's place. He's a pharmacist, a pillar of the community." "He's a ghost," Clara countered. "I went there. The building has no windows on the upper floors. Why would a hotel have no windows, Elias?" Inside the castle, H. Holmes was refining his masterpiece. To the world, he was a dapper gentleman with a melodic voice. To his victims, he was the last thing they ever saw. The hotel was a labyrinth of architectural madness. There were stairways that led to nowhere, doors that opened into solid brick walls, and a centralized control panel in his office that allowed him to flood any room with lethal gas. One evening, Holmes stood in his basement, illuminated by a single buzzing Edison bulb. He wasn't just a killer, he was a student of the era's new obsession with efficiency. He had installed a dummy waiter large enough to transport a human body from the third floor directly to the acid vats in the cellar. "Science," Holmes whispered to the flickering light, "is the ultimate permission." Chapter 7. The Wizard and the Muckraker. Thorne knew he couldn't go to the Chicago police. The force was riddled with corruption, many of them on the payroll of the very men who funded the fair. He needed a different kind of ally. He needed a man who understood the invisible. He found Tesla at the Westinghouse Pavilion, surrounded by humming transformers. "Nikola, I need to see through walls," Thorne bluntly stated. "You speak of the X-ray. Röntgen's work is still in its infancy, Elias. I don't need a medical miracle. I need to know if a building in Englewood is a tomb. People are vanishing, and the vibrations you talk about, the energy, it feels wrong over there. The air is heavy with the smell of scorched hair and lye." Tesla paused. He was a man of logic, but he was also a man of deep, almost psychic intuition. He handed Thorne a primitive induction coil and a set of modified receivers. "Sound travels through solid mass differently if that mass is hollow. If there are secret chambers, these will find them.
But be careful, Elias. Some secrets are kept in the dark because the light would go mad looking at them. Chapter 8. The Night the Lights Flickered. October 1893. The fair was ending. A cold wind blew off Lake Michigan, carrying the scent of the coming winter and the end of an era. Thorne and Clara converged on the castle while Holmes was away on business in Fort Worth. Using Tesla's devices, they pressed their ears to the brickwork. Instead of a solid thud of a well-built wall, they heard a hollow, whistling moan, the sound of a draft moving through hidden vents. They broke in through a cold chute. What they found wasn't a hotel, it was a factory. They moved through the black closet, a room lined entirely with iron plates to muffle screams. They found the elastic room, where Holmes attempted to see how far the human frame could stretch before snapping. But it was the basement that broke them. Amid the surgical tools and the smell of formaldehyde, Clara found a trunk. Inside was a collection of shoes, hundreds of them, small fashionable boots of the city and sturdy worn shoes of the farm girls. "He didn't just kill them," Clara choked out, clutching a silk ribbon she recognized from the ledgers. "He processed them." Chapter 10. The Aftermath of the 20th Century. Holmes escaped that night, fleeing across the country before finally being caught in Philadelphia for a petty insurance fraud, the only thing the law could initially pin him on. It wasn't until the Chicago police finally dug up the floorboards of the Englewood Castle that the true scale of his horror was revealed. Tesla, meanwhile, sat in his New York hotel room watching the sun rise. The fair was gone, the White City was ashes, his dream of free energy was being crushed by the weight of corporate greed. He realized then that progress was a double-edged sword. For every light he turned on, he provided a place for a monster to hide in the glare. As the 20th century dawned, America stood tall, powered by Tesla's AC current, documented by Thorne's headlines, and haunted by the memory of the man in the castle. The modern age had arrived, and it was beautiful, terrifying, and bathed in a light that cost more than anyone was willing to admit.